Hello students, this is Mr. Abrams, and I've made this video in order to introduce the new grading policy that will apply in English in Q2 of this semester. So please watch this video closely, answer the questions that pop up, and leave a question, comment, or reaction at the end in the box that's provided. So because this is a video, I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. You can pause, go back over things, slow it down in order to understand it, but I want to try to make this as short as possible. So let me go through the 6 points, and then I'll all at once, and then I'll go through them one at a time. So first of all, there will be no more penalty for missing daily work. That doesn't apply to larger assignments, but participation in daily work, if you don't do them, you don't get a 0. You get a grade of incomplete in Aspen, which doesn't affect your grade at all. On the flip side of that, late work will not be entered as a grade in Aspen. Work that is submitted on time will be graded on a 50 to 100 scale, not 0 to 100, but 50 is the lowest grade you can get for an assignment that is submitted in good faith on time. Also, every student will have a graded individual conference with me each 2 to 3 weeks. And these will count towards the same category of assignment that quizzes are in. And these will also be graded. Or rather, these will be graded, even if you miss them. Summative assessments, that's teacher talk for the big tests and papers, presentations, Socratic seminars at the end of every unit, will always receive grades whether they are submitted or not. A missing summative will be entered into Aspen as a 0. Your final semester 1 grade will be a minimum of D if you pass the second quarter. So in other words, students who really struggled with the first quarter and were not able to pass, for whatever reason, you have a kind of a fresh start. And if you pass the second quarter, you will get a D or higher. Finally, students who, despite this policy, somehow fail the whole semester will not receive an F. You will receive a grade of I. Currently, CPS makes that possible. Hopefully, they will keep that possible through the end of January. And the incomplete or I grade goes on your transcript but doesn't affect your GPA. You still need to make the class up in evening school or night school, or rather summer school or online school or something like that, but you don't get an F in your transcript, in your GPA. So let me go through these one by one. First of all, missing work does not affect grades. I think that's pretty clear. If you miss an assignment, and we're not talking about big assignments here, we're not talking about conferences, we're talking about participation, and we're talking about work that we call formative assessments that I give on one day and is assigned for a few days later in order to keep up with the learning in a unit. If you miss it, it will not affect your grade. You will see an incomplete in Aspen, but it will not affect your grade. Similarly, or rather on the flip side of that, I will not enter late work grades in Aspen. Once it is late, it is missing. Now that doesn't mean that you can't enter it in Google Classroom, and that doesn't mean that I won't be talking to you about it, and that doesn't mean you don't need to do it. But it will not change your grade if you submit late work. So the 50 to 100 grading scale I think is pretty straightforward. If you submit work on time, it will be graded between 50 and 100, not 0 to 100. To make sure that you are on track and that I know where you are at, especially for students who are not submitting work during class or in between classes, you will have regular individual conferences with me. They will happen every 2 to 3 weeks, and I will spot check your learning. I will give you oral quizzes. I will ask you to write down something and show it to me, and they will count towards the same category that your quizzes go in. So these are grades that if you miss the conference, you will get a missing grade for this, and it will affect your GPA. It will affect your grade for the semester. Summative assessments, which, as I said, is teacher talk for the major assignments that you have at the end of a unit. So that could be an essay, that could be a test, that could be a Socratic seminar or a presentation. They will all receive grades. Whether they're submitted or not, a summative assessment will get a grade of 0 if it's missing or 50 to 100 if it is submitted. Now, I want to say a little bit about summative assessments. As I said, these could be essays, tests, projects, Socratic seminars, presentations at the end of a unit that demonstrate your learning on the main skill or skills in a unit. For example, if using evidence to support claims in an argumentative essay, that would be a suitable summative assessment for a unit. Writing an argumentative essay would be late in the year, but using evidence might be the summative assessment skill for a particular unit. They have a definite endpoint. So I teach something for, let's say, 3 weeks, and then at that point, having done everything we can to get everybody to pass, we administer the summative, whatever type of assessment it is, and whatever point of progress you're at that point, that's it. Now, if you still need additional learning beyond that, then we have to come up with a way to do that for you. But the summative grade at that point has gone in. And the only way to change it would be if there's some sort of alternative assessment that we come up with, or something like a retake. And that's not always going to be possible. So missed summatives go in as a 0. So the reason for that is that the grade in English is made up of a series of summative assessments. We have, let's say, 8 skills. That might not be the exact number this year. And you're expected to learn all 8 of those skills and show your mastery on those. And if you are able to demonstrate that you have learned all 8, or at least maybe you knew some of them before, you could be successful on all 8, then you should get a very good grade. If you miss a few, if you don't succeed at a few of them, you still might get a good grade and you most likely will pass. But every one of them that you miss is failing to show that you've succeeded at a major skill for the class. So summative assessments can often be late. It really depends on the situation that I find myself in. So in general, 3 days late will be the maximum, but sometimes the summative might be due very close to the end of the quarter, and it might be something that takes me a while to grade, and therefore you won't have any leeway to be late from the official deadline. Late summatives may also need to meet additional requirements, maybe a one-page reflection or maybe something else. Also, there might be exceptional situations in which students may be given alternate summative assessments. Finally, if something comes up and you're going to be late with a summative or with any assignment, please let me know ahead of time. That will make things work better for you. So just to sum up what we've talked about so far, you will be graded solely on the work you turn in on time and on all the summative assessments, whether you turn them in or not, and on all the formative conferences that were scheduled for you. I mentioned this, I think this is pretty straightforward. If you pass Q2, you will receive at least a D for the semester, and possibly more depending on what your final average is. If you do not pass the course, you will receive an I, not an F, as long as CPS continues to make that available. You won't receive credit. You will have to retake the class in some form, but your GPA will not be damaged by it. Somebody asked me a question when I was talking to them about this policy. What if I miss a deadline by a little, like those 11:59 p.m. deadlines? So I'm going to say something about how I set deadlines, and I'll try to be very good about this over the next quarter. First of all, follow the rule. Notify me ahead of time if you are running behind. The reality is I most often will not be able to extend a deadline for daily work, but it can't hurt. When I'm looking for your daily work, if I don't see it, I'll look for an email from you. Even if I didn't respond to the email, that might influence how I see it, depending on the situation. So as much as possible, I will assign work on this schedule. I get up fairly early in the morning, and sometime around 5 or 6 a.m., I start looking at work that has come in from the previous night. That helps me to adjust whatever plans I have for the class that day, and I need to have your work by then. It may have had an 11:59 p.m. deadline because that's the default deadline that Google Classroom puts on work. I won't always make that 5 a.m., although I'll try to if that's what I plan to do. If your work is there when I need it to be there in order to plan in the morning, then especially if there's an email accompanying it or along with it, um, then even if it says late in Google Classroom, I will try to make a note and at any rate enter it into Aspen. If it is a participation grade, it's due at some point during class. It might be due a bell ringer that's due 15 minutes in. It might be due by the end of class, but that's that. There's an absolute cutoff, and participation grades can never be made up outside of class. If it's something you need to do your part for, maybe a draft for peer editing or part of a group presentation or a poem for a poetry reading or something else for in-class presentation, then it's due in class. You can't make it up because it's not meaningful after that. So again, anything that is late and is no longer hot or no longer meaningful in class is something that you bring up in your individual conference with me. And hopefully that will raise your conference grade. So there's some things to think about as you reflect on this policy. It's easy to misunderstand it, I think, either to be stressed out by it, even though it's not intended to stress you out, it's intended to reduce your stress, or to think, oh, this is really easy, I don't have to turn anything in. So first of all, turning in work regularly and earning participation grades will raise your grade for two reasons. One is these generally are assignments that get high grades, and two, if you complete these assignments, you're getting the most out of class. You're learning what needs to be taught. You know how you're doing. I know how you're doing before it's too late. On the flip side, if you miss class and don't turn in assignments regularly, there's still consequences. First of all, if you miss class regularly and fail to turn in assignments, you're probably not going to be able to succeed on the summative assessments. And then second of all, if you regularly miss class or fail to turn in assignments, if I'm not entering zeros into the gradebook, I'm calling home. And calling home may also be supplemented by other actions that the school will take that may be other supports that you will be asked to participate in, and they may even be legal interventions depending on what the situation is and the nature of the problem. So take a moment to think about your response to this and put it in the box that will pop up. I hope this is something that makes a positive difference for everyone. And I'd like to hear your feedback. If I need to make changes to this policy, of course I will. But for now, I think I've got it where I want it. And I'd just like to hear your reaction to see if there's some things that I didn't consider. So let's have a great quarter, great rest of the semester. We'll work with the situation that we have been given as best as we can. Thank you very much.